I found the tow truck backing out of my driveway at 6:30 on a Tuesday morning with my Ford F-150 hooked up to it, and my blood pressure went from 0 to volcanic in about 3 seconds flat. I ran out in my gym shorts and undershirt, barefoot on the cold Arizona pavement, waving my arms like some kind of madman. "Hey, what the hell are you doing? That's my truck," I shouted at the driver, who looked just as confused as I felt. The driver, a stocky guy in his 40s with a grease-stained baseball cap, stopped and rolled down his window. "You Ethan Jacobson?" "Yeah, that's me. Why are you towing my truck from my own property?" He pulled out a work order and squinted at it. "Says here violation of HOA parking regulations." I got a call from. He checked the paperwork again. "Karen Patterson, HOA president, says your commercial vehicle is in violation of the neighborhood covenants." I felt my jaw clench so hard I thought my teeth might crack. Karen Patterson. Of course it was her. The woman had been a thorn in my side since I moved into this Scottsdale neighborhood 8 months ago. Every week it was something new. My grass was a 1/4 inch too long. My mailbox had a tiny rust spot. I put my trash cans out 4 hours too early. The woman had nothing better to do than make everyone's life miserable. "That's insane," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "This is my personal truck. I use it for work sometimes, sure, but it's registered to me personally. It doesn't have any company logos or anything." The tow truck driver shrugged apologetically. "Look, man, I just do what I'm told. The HOA has an account with us. They call, I come. You got a problem, take it up with them, but I gotta take this truck to the impound lot. You can get it back once you pay the fees and sort it out with your HOA." "How much are the fees?" "Towing fee is $250, plus there's a daily storage fee of $75 starting after the first 24 hours. I ran my hand through my hair, feeling completely helpless. "This is ridiculous. Can you just give me 5 minutes to call her?" "Sorry, buddy, I've already got it hooked up. Time is money. Your HOA will have all the information about getting it back." He started rolling up his window. I stood there in my driveway, watching this guy drive away with my truck. My work truck. The truck I needed to get to my construction site in Temp in less than an hour. I had a crew counting on me, materials being delivered, and inspectors scheduled. And now, I was standing here like an idiot with no vehicle. I stormed back inside my house, grabbed my phone, and immediately called Karen Patterson. It went straight to voicemail. Of course it did. I left a message that was probably way too angry, telling her exactly what I thought of her little stunt and demanding she call me back immediately. Then I called my business partner, Mike, and explained the situation. He agreed to pick me up and we could use his truck for the day, but this was still going to throw everything off schedule. While I waited, I pulled up the HOA covenants on my laptop. I had read through them when I bought the house, but I wanted to make sure I had not missed anything. I found the section about parking. It said that commercial vehicles, defined as vehicles with visible business signage, vehicles over a certain weight class requiring special licensing, or vehicles obviously used for commercial purposes like dump trucks or semi-trucks, were not allowed to be parked in driveways or streets overnight. They had to be kept in garages or off the property. My truck was none of those things. It was a standard Ford F-150, no business signs, regular license plates, completely indistinguishable from any other pickup truck in the neighborhood. Half the guys on my street had similar trucks. The only reason Karen knew I used it for work was because she was a nosy busybody who apparently had nothing better to do than monitor everyone's comings and goings. I took screenshots of the relevant sections and forwarded them to myself. Then I got dressed properly and waited outside for Mike. When he pulled up 20 minutes later, I was still fuming. Mike took one look at my face and whistled low. "That bad, huh?" "Worse," I said, climbing into his truck. "Karen Patterson is going to regret this." "What are you going to do?" "First, I'm going to get through today. Then I'm going to figure out how to fight back. Legally," I added, seeing his concerned expression. "I'm not going to do anything stupid, but this woman has been harassing me for months and this crosses a line." We got to the job site and I tried to focus on work, but my mind kept drifting back to my truck sitting in some impound lot. Every time I thought about it, I got angry all over again. During lunch break, I called the towing company to find out exactly where my truck was and what I needed to do to get it back. They told me it was at their lot off the I-10, and I would need written authorization from the HOA to retrieve it, plus payment of all fees. "What if I just pay the fees myself?" I asked. "Still need the HOA authorization since they initiated the tow. It's a civil matter between you and them." Perfect. So Karen had me over a barrel. I had to go through her to get my own truck back. I tried calling her 3 more times that afternoon. Each call went to voicemail. I sent 2 emails. No response. By the time Mike dropped me back at my house that evening, I was beyond frustrated. I was calculating in my head how much this was costing me. The tow fee alone was bad enough, but if this dragged on for days, the storage fees would add up fast. Plus, I would have to keep bumming rides or renting a vehicle, which meant more money out of my pocket. I made myself dinner, checked my email obsessively for any response from Karen, and then did something I probably should have done months ago. I started researching Arizona HOA laws and homeowner rights. What I found was eye-opening. Arizona actually has pretty strong laws protecting homeowners from HOA overreach. HOAs have to follow their own governing documents to the letter. They have to provide proper notice before taking action against a homeowner. They have to give the homeowner an opportunity to contest violations. And if they violate their own rules or state law, homeowners can take legal action against them. I pulled up my HOA's violation policy. It clearly stated that before any enforcement action could be taken, the HOA must send a written notice to the homeowner describing the violation and giving them 10 days to correct it or request a hearing. I checked my email, my physical mailbox, even my spam folder. Nothing. No notice. No warning. Karen had just gone straight to having my truck towed without following the HOA's own procedures. A slow smile spread across my face. She had messed up. Badly. I spent the next 2 hours documenting everything. I took photos of my truck from before it got towed, showing no commercial signage. I took screenshots of the HOA covenants with the commercial vehicle definition. I printed out the violation procedure policy. I created a timeline of every interaction I had had with Karen since moving in, including dates, times, and descriptions of each complaint she had made. Then I drafted a formal letter. I addressed it to the HOA board, not just Karen, and I laid out the entire situation. I explained that my vehicle did not meet the definition of a commercial vehicle under the covenants. I pointed out that no proper notice had been given. I demanded immediate authorization to retrieve my truck and full reimbursement of all towing and storage fees. And I stated that if this was not resolved within 24 hours, I would be pursuing legal action for harassment and violation of Arizona HOA statutes. I sent it via email to every board member whose contact information I could find, and I also printed copies to hand deliver the next day. That night, I barely slept. I kept imagining different scenarios, different ways this could play out. Part of me wanted to just pay the fees and move on, avoid the conflict. But a bigger part of me was tired of being pushed around. Karen had been bullying me and probably dozens of other homeowners, and someone needed to stand up to her. The next morning, Mike picked me up again. Before we headed to the job site, I asked him to swing by Karen's house so I could deliver the letter in person. Karen lived 4 streets over from me in a pristine 2-story house with a perfectly manicured lawn and flower beds that looked like something out of a magazine. Her silver Lexus SUV sat in the driveway, which I noted for future reference. I walked up to her door and rang the bell. It took a minute, but eventually Karen answered. She was probably in her early 50s, with blonde highlights and that particular expression of perpetual dissatisfaction that some people seem to wear like a badge of honor. "Ethan," she said, not quite meeting my eyes, "I've been meaning to call you back." "Have you?" I said flatly. "Because I called you 6 times yesterday and sent 2 emails. Seems like you've been avoiding me." "I've been very busy. HOA business is quite demanding." "I'm sure it is. Well, I'm here to deliver this." I handed her the envelope with my letter. "That's a formal complaint about the illegal towing of my vehicle. I expect a response within 24 hours as stated in the letter. I've also sent copies to every other board member." Her face flushed red. "Illegal. Your truck was in clear violation of the parking covenants." "No, it wasn't, and you know it. But that's not even the main issue. The main issue is that you didn't follow proper procedure. You're required to send written notice and allow me time to respond before taking enforcement action. You didn't do that, which means you violated the HOA's own rules. I don't have to justify my decisions to you. As HOA president, I have the authority to follow the rules," I interrupted. "The same rules that apply to everyone else. You don't get to just make up your own procedures because you don't like someone. That's called harassment, Karen. And there are laws against it. Are you threatening me? I'm informing you of my rights. There's a difference. Now, are you going to authorize the release of my truck and reimburse the fees, or do I need to take this to the next level?" She crossed her arms. "I'll discuss it with the board at our next meeting." "When's that?" 2 weeks from Thursday." "Not acceptable. You had my truck towed yesterday. This gets resolved now, not in 2 weeks. I've given you 24 hours. If I don't hear from you by this time tomorrow, my next call is to a lawyer." I turned and walked back to Mike's truck before she could respond. My heart was pounding, but I felt good. Better than I had since this whole thing started. "That went well," Mike said dryly as I got in. "We'll see. I might have just made things worse. Or you might have finally put her in her place. About time someone did." We got to the job site and I threw myself into work, trying not to obsess over what would happen next, but I kept checking my phone compulsively. Around 2 in the afternoon, I got an email. Not from Karen, but from another board member named Richard Hoffman. He apologized for the situation and said he had not been aware of the towing until he received my letter that morning. He was looking into it and would get back to me soon. That was something, at least. It meant the other board members were taking it seriously. An hour later, Richard called me directly. "Ethan, I've reviewed your letter and spoken with Karen," he said. "I want you to know that I completely agree this was handled improperly. Karen should have followed the violation procedure before taking such drastic action. However, she maintains that your truck does constitute a commercial vehicle because you use it for your business." "It's a personal truck that I sometimes use for work," I corrected. "There's no signage. It's not a commercial class vehicle. It doesn't meet any of the criteria in the covenants." "I understand. And honestly, I agree with you. But Karen is insisting and she has support from one other board member. We need a full board vote to override her decision." "When can that happen?" "I'm working on scheduling an emergency meeting for tomorrow evening. In the meantime, I'd like to personally authorize the release of your truck. Karen won't like it, but I think it's the right thing to do." I felt a wave of relief. "Thank you, Richard. I really appreciate that. I'll send you the authorization letter within the hour. As for the fees, that's going to have to wait until after the board meeting. I can't commit HOA funds without a vote, but between you and me, I think you've got a strong case for reimbursement." "That's fair. Thank you again." After we hung up, I felt like I could finally breathe again. At least I would get my truck back tonight, even if I had to eat the $250 towing fee for now. True to his word, Richard sent the authorization letter within 45 minutes. As soon as work ended, Mike drove me to the impound lot. The process of getting my truck back was tedious but straightforward. I showed them the authorization, paid the towing fee with my credit card while mentally adding it to the list of grievances against Karen, and finally climbed behind the wheel of my own vehicle again. I followed Mike back toward our neighborhood, and as we drove, an idea started forming in my mind. Karen had towed my truck from my own driveway for a bogus violation. What if I could find an actual, legitimate violation with her vehicle? I knew it was petty. I knew I should probably just let the board meeting play out and trust that justice would prevail. But something about this whole situation had awakened a vindictive streak I did not know I had. Karen had gone out of her way to make my life difficult for months. She had cost me money, time, and stress. And from what Richard had said, she was not even backing down or admitting she was wrong. So yeah, maybe it was petty, but I was going to do it anyway. When I got home, I parked my truck in the garage this time just to be safe. Then I grabbed a beer and took a walk around the neighborhood. Casual, just getting some evening air, definitely not scoping out Karen's property for violations. Except that was exactly what I was doing. At first glance, her property was immaculate. But as I walked past slowly, pretending to be absorbed in my phone, I started noticing little things. Her house number on the curb was faded and barely visible, which was technically a violation according to the covenants. Something about emergency services being able to clearly identify homes. There was a small crack in her driveway that probably counted as a maintenance issue. And most interestingly, her garbage cans were visible from the street, tucked beside her house but not actually behind the fence line. None of those were great, though. They were minor things that would just make me look petty if I reported them. I was about to give up and head home when I noticed something else. Karen's Lexus was parked in her driveway as usual, but there was something stuck under the windshield wiper. I walked a little closer, trying not to be obvious about it. It was a parking pass for a medical building. Not interesting in itself, except that it had expired 3 months ago and she had apparently never bothered to remove it from her windshield. Still not particularly useful, but I took note of it. I continued my walk, looping around the neighborhood. When I came back past Karen's house from the other direction about 20 minutes later, something had changed. Her Lexus was now parked on the street instead of the driveway. I stopped and pulled out my phone, pretending to check something while I observed. The street parking in our neighborhood was restricted. You could park on the street during the day, but overnight parking, defined as any vehicle left on the street between midnight and 6 a.m., was prohibited. It was one of Karen's favorite rules to enforce, actually. I knew of at least 3 neighbors who had gotten violation notices for it, but it was only 7 p.m. now, so that was not helpful unless she left it there overnight, which seemed unlikely. I was about to move on when I noticed something else. The registration sticker on her license plate looked off. I walked a little closer, still trying to be casual about it, and peered at it. The sticker showed it had expired 2 months ago. My heart started beating faster. That was not an HOA violation. That was an actual, legitimate legal violation. In Arizona, driving with expired registration was a civil traffic violation subject to fines, and a vehicle with expired registration could be towed. I took out my phone and snapped a photo, making sure the license plate and expired sticker were clearly visible. Then I went home and did more research. According to Arizona law, any vehicle parked on a public street with expired registration for more than 24 hours could be reported to the police non-emergency line, and they could authorize a tow if they deemed it appropriate. But Karen's car was not going to be on the street for 24 hours. She would almost certainly move it back to her driveway before bed, unless I got really, really lucky. I sat on my front porch with my beer, keeping an eye on Karen Street. At 8 p.m., her car was still there. 9 p.m., still there. At 10 p.m., I saw her garage door open and her husband's car pull in. The garage door closed again. Her Lexus remained on the street. At 11 p.m., the lights in her house started going off. By 11:30, the house was completely dark, and her Lexus was still parked on the street. I could not believe my luck. Not only was her car on the street overnight, which was an HOA violation, but it also had expired registration, which was a legal violation. I decided to wait until morning to do anything. If her car was still there at 6 a.m., after being on the street past midnight, then I had her on the overnight parking violation. And if the registration was still expired, which it obviously would be, I could report that too. I barely slept again, but this time it was from anticipation rather than anger. I set my alarm for 5:30 and forced myself to at least try to rest. When my alarm went off, I immediately looked out my window. I could not see Karen Street from my house, so I got dressed quickly and took another walk. Her Lexus was still there. Same spot, expired registration clearly visible in the early morning light. I took several more photos with timestamps, then went home and documented everything. I noted the time I had first observed the vehicle on the street, the time the household lights went off, and the time I verified it was still there in the morning. Then, I drafted an HOA violation notice using the exact format that Karen had used on other homeowners. I described the violation, cited the specific covenant, and stated that the vehicle needed to be moved within 24 hours or it would be subject to towing at the owner's expense. I printed it out, signed it as a concerned homeowner, and dropped it in her mailbox around 6:15 a.m. before I had to leave for work. But I was not done yet. I also called the Scottsdale Police Department's non-emergency line and reported a vehicle parked on a public street with expired registration. "How long has it been parked there?" the dispatcher asked. "I first noticed it around 7 p.m. yesterday evening, and it's still there now." "So at least 11 hours overnight. And you're certain the registration is expired?" "Yes. The sticker clearly shows an expiration date of 2 months ago. I can send photos if that helps." "That won't be necessary right now. Let me get some information from you." I provided my name, address, and contact information and gave her Karen's address and license plate number. "An officer will look into it when one is available in that area. It's not an emergency, so it might be a few hours." "That's fine, thank you." I hung up feeling satisfied. Even if the police did not tow it right away, just having an officer show up to investigate would probably rattle Karen. And she would have to deal with getting her registration renewed, which would cost her time and money. I went to work feeling better than I had in days. Mike noticed the difference immediately. "You look like the cat that ate the canary," he said. "What did you do?" I told him the whole story. He listened with growing amusement. "Man, you're playing with fire. You know that, right?" "She started it. I said, knowing I sounded like a child and not caring. Besides, I'm not making anything up. Her registration really is expired. I'm just doing my civic duty by reporting it. Uh-huh. And the HOA violation notice. Just following the proper procedures that Karen is so fond of. Mike shook his head, laughing. This is going to end badly for someone. I just hope it's her and not you. Around 10 a.m. I got a call from an unknown number. I almost did not answer, but something made me pick up. Is this Ethan Jacobson? A professional female voice asked. Yes, this is Ethan. This is Officer Mendez with the Scottsdale Police Department. I'm calling about the vehicle you reported this morning with expired registration. Yes, thank you for following up. I'm at the location now. The vehicle does indeed have expired registration. I've left a warning citation on the windshield, and the owner will need to renew the registration within 72 hours or face additional fines. If the vehicle is still on the street with expired registration after that time, it can be towed. Not quite as satisfying as an immediate tow, but I would take it. However, Officer Mendez continued, I wanted to let you know that the vehicle also violates a local overnight street parking ordinance. Normally, we don't enforce HOA rules, but in this case, the city has a similar ordinance for this neighborhood. Since the vehicle has been here overnight and has expired registration, I'm authorized to have it towed if you want to pursue that. I had not expected that. I thought about it for a moment. Part of me wanted to say yes immediately, but another part of me hesitated. Did I really want to go that far? It felt like escalation to a level I might not be able to walk back from. Then I remembered standing in my driveway in my underwear, watching my truck get towed away for no legitimate reason. I remembered Karen's smug face when I confronted her. I remembered every petty complaint she had filed against me over the past 8 months. Yes, I said, I want to pursue that. Understood. I'll call for a tow truck now. The owner will be responsible for all towing and impound fees. They can contact our office for information about retrieving their vehicle. Thank you, officer. After we hung up, I sat in my truck for a minute, processing what I had just done. I had actually done it. I had gotten Karen's car towed. Part of me felt guilty. But a much larger part of me felt vindicated. I went back to work and tried to focus, but I kept checking my phone, half expecting an angry call from Karen. It did not come. The emergency HOA board meeting was scheduled for 7 p.m. that evening at Richard's house. I showed up a few minutes early and found Richard setting up chairs in his living room. Ethan, glad you could make it. How's the truck situation? Got it back yesterday, thanks to you. I really appreciate you going to bat for me. Just doing the right thing. Unfortunately, this meeting might be a bit contentious. Karen is not happy about any of this. Yeah, about that. There's something you should know. I told him about Karen's car being towed that morning. His eyes widened. Oh boy, she's going to think you did that out of revenge. It wasn't revenge. Her registration was genuinely expired and she was parked on the street overnight, which violates both HOA and city ordinances. I just reported a legitimate violation, the same way she reported what she thought was a violation with my truck. Richard rubbed his face. I mean, you're not wrong, but the optics are terrible. This is going to turn into a war. It was already a war. I'm just not rolling over anymore. The other board members started arriving. There were 5 total. Karen, Richard, a retired teacher named Susan Thompson, a lawyer named David Park, and a young tech worker named Jason Miller. Karen was the last to arrive, and she looked furious. Her hair was slightly disheveled, and her makeup was not quite as perfect as usual. She stared daggers at me the moment she walked in. You, she said, pointing at me. You had my car towed. I reported a vehicle with expired registration parked illegally on a public street. I said calmly. The police made the decision to tow it. Don't play games with me. You did this to get back at me for your truck. I did this because you've been harassing me for 8 months and I'm tired of it. And unlike your decision to tow my truck, my report was based on actual, legitimate violations. Can we all just sit down and discuss this calmly? Richard interjected. We're here to address the issue with Ethan's truck and the proper procedure for handling violations. Everyone took their seats, though Karen continued glaring at me. Richard started the meeting by summarizing the situation. He explained that my truck had been towed without proper notice, that I had filed a formal complaint, and that I was requesting reimbursement of the towing fees and an official acknowledgement that the towing was improper. I disagree completely, Karen said immediately. Mr. Jacobson's vehicle is clearly a commercial vehicle. He uses it for his construction business. That's a violation of our covenants, and I was well within my rights to have it towed. But the covenant specifically defines commercial vehicles, David, the lawyer, pointed out. And Ethan's truck doesn't meet that definition. It has no business signage, it's not a commercial class vehicle, and it's registered to him personally, not to his business. He uses it for work, Karen insisted. That makes it commercial. By that logic, anyone who drives their personal car to an office job would be driving a commercial vehicle, Susan said. That's not reasonable. Furthermore, David continued, even if it were a violation, which I don't believe it is, proper procedure requires written notice and an opportunity to respond before enforcement action. Karen, did you send Ethan a notice before authorizing the tow? Karen's face flushed. I didn't think it was necessary. The violation was obvious. The procedure doesn't have exceptions for what you think is obvious, David said. It applies to all situations. We have these rules for a reason. I move that we officially recognize the towing as improper and reimburse Mr. Jacobson for all associated fees, Richard said. I second that motion, Susan said immediately. All in favor? Richard asked. Richard, Susan, David, and Jason all raised their hands. Only Karen abstained. Motion passes 4-0 with 1 abstention, Richard said. Ethan, the HOA will reimburse you the full $250 towing fee. I apologize on behalf of the board for this situation. Thank you, I said, feeling genuinely relieved. I appreciate you all taking this seriously. However, Karen said sharply, I want to address Mr. Jacobson's retaliatory actions. He had my car towed this morning out of pure spite. I reported legitimate violations, I repeated. Your registration was expired, which is a state law issue, not an HOA issue. And you were parked on the street overnight, which violates both our covenants and city ordinance. You were looking for violations because you wanted revenge. No, I was walking through the neighborhood and noticed your car had expired registration. That's a safety issue. Expired registration means expired insurance verification. Would you want uninsured vehicles in our neighborhood? It was a bit of a stretch since expired registration did not necessarily mean expired insurance, but it sounded good. I think we're getting off track, David said. Whether or not Ethan reported Karen's vehicle out of personal motivations, the fact remains that if there were legitimate violations, he was within his rights to report them. Just as Karen thought she was within her rights to report Ethan's truck, even though we've now determined that was incorrect. This is ridiculous, Karen snapped. You're all taking his side. We're following our own rules and state law, Richard said firmly. That's not taking sides. That's doing our jobs as board members. Now, is there any other business we need to address? Yes, Karen said coldly. I'm calling for a vote of no confidence in Richard's leadership as board president. He's clearly biased and unfit to serve in that role." An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. "Karen, I don't think that's appropriate right now," Susan said quietly. "We're all a bit heated. Maybe we should table this discussion for another time." "I want it on the record," Karen insisted. "Fine," Richard said, looking tired. "Anyone want to second Karen's motion?" Nobody spoke. Without a second, the motion dies. "Are we done here?" Karen stood up abruptly. "I need to leave anyway. I have to deal with getting my car back from the impound lot thanks to Mr. Jacobson." She stormed out without another word. After she left, the atmosphere in the room relaxed noticeably. "I apologize for that," Richard said to me. "Karen has been increasingly difficult lately. I think the power has gone to her head." "How long has she been HOA president?" I asked. 3 years. Before that, the neighborhood was much more relaxed. But Karen is very type A, very controlling. She means well, I think, but she takes everything too far. "Has anyone else complained about her?" The board members exchanged glances. "Several people," Susan admitted. "But most homeowners don't want to make waves. It's easier to just comply with her demands, even when they are unreasonable." "That's not healthy for the community," I said. "Someone needs to push back." "You certainly did that today," Jason said with a slight smile. "Getting her car towed was pretty bold." "It was fair," I corrected. "She got my truck towed for a made-up violation. Her car got towed for real violations. If anything, my actions were more justified than hers." "I don't disagree," David said. "But be careful, Ethan. Karen is vindictive. She's going to try to make your life even more difficult after this. Let her try. I know my rights now, and I'll document everything." The meeting wrapped up shortly after that. Richard gave me a check from the HOA account for $250, and I thanked him again for his support. As I drove home, I felt a mix of emotions. Satisfaction at having stood up for myself and won, anxiety about what Karen might do next, and a strange sense of anticipation, like this was just the beginning of something bigger. Over the next few days, I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. But Karen seemed to be staying quiet. I did not see her around the neighborhood, and I did not receive any new violation notices. I did, however, hear through the neighborhood grapevine that Karen had spent over $400 getting her car back and dealing with her expired registration. Apparently, she had not realized it had expired and was furious about the whole situation. Good. Maybe now she understood how it felt. About a week after the board meeting, I came home from work to find a certified letter in my mailbox. It was from a law firm representing Karen Patterson personally, not the HOA. My stomach dropped as I opened it. The letter stated that Karen was pursuing civil action against me for harassment, defamation, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. It referenced the towing of her vehicle and claimed that I had engaged in a campaign of targeted harassment designed to cause her emotional and financial harm. She was demanding $5,000 in damages plus attorney's fees, or she would file a lawsuit. I read the letter 3 times, my hands shaking with anger. She was actually trying to sue me for reporting her legitimate violations after she had illegally towed my truck. The vindictive part of me wanted to crumple up the letter and ignore it. But the rational part knew I needed to take this seriously. Even frivolous lawsuits could be expensive to defend. I called David Park, the lawyer on the HOA board. I knew he practiced corporate law, not civil litigation, but I figured he could at least point me in the right direction. "David, it's Ethan Jacobson. I need some advice. Karen just sent me a demand letter threatening to sue me." "Are you serious? On what grounds?" I read him the letter over the phone. He was silent for a moment after I finished. "This is absurd. She has no case." Reporting legitimate violations to law enforcement isn't harassment, and there's no defamation if you didn't make any false statements. So I should just ignore it. No, you need to respond, but not in the way she wants. Do you have homeowner's insurance? Yeah, of course. Your policy probably includes personal liability coverage. Contact your insurance company and let them know about the letter. They'll assign an attorney to handle it if she actually files suit. In the meantime, I can help you draft a response to the demand letter. We'll make it very clear that her claims are without merit and that any actual lawsuit will be met with a counterclaim for abuse of process. Can I do that? Counterclaim. If she files a frivolous lawsuit just to harass you, absolutely. And based on everything that's happened, I think you'd have a strong case. We spent the next hour on the phone, with David helping me draft a response. The letter was professional but firm. It laid out the timeline of events, emphasized that all my actions were legally justified, and stated that any lawsuit would be vigorously defended and would result in a counterclaim. I sent the letter via certified mail the next day and also contacted my insurance company as David had advised. The insurance rep assured me that if Karen actually filed suit, they would handle my defense. 2 weeks passed. Karen did not file a lawsuit. Apparently, the response letter had called her bluff, but the tension in the neighborhood was palpable. People were starting to choose sides. Some homeowners thought I had gone too far getting Karen's car towed. Others were glad someone had finally stood up to her. A few people started sharing their own horror stories about Karen's behavior as HOA president. One neighbor, a retired veteran named Tom Rivers who lived 3 doors down from me, stopped by one evening to talk. "Heard about your troubles with Karen," he said, accepting the beer I offered him. "Want to share something with you." He pulled out his phone and showed me photos. They were of violation notices Karen had sent him over the past 2 years. Dozens of them. His lawn was allegedly too long, then too short. His tree branches extended 3 inches over the property line into the common area. His holiday decorations stayed up 2 days past the acceptable date. His house needed repainting even though he had painted it 18 months earlier. "This is insane," I said, scrolling through the photos. "Has she been doing this to everyone?" "Not everyone. Just people she doesn't like. And her criteria for not liking someone seems to be pretty arbitrary. I think she just enjoys the power trip." "Has anyone ever formally complained about her?" A few people tried. But Karen has allies on the board, or at least she did. And most people don't want the hassle. It's easier to just do whatever she says and try to stay under her radar. "That's not right. She's basically bullying the whole neighborhood." "I agree. Which is why I wanted to talk to you. After what happened with your truck and then her car, people are starting to talk. There's momentum building. Some of us think it might be time to recall her as HOA president." "Can you do that?" "According to the bylaws, yes. If 10% of homeowners sign a petition calling for a recall election, the board has to hold one within 30 days. How many homes are in the neighborhood? 143. So we'd need at least 15 signatures to trigger a recall." "Do you think you can get them?" Tom grinned. "I've already got 8, including yours if you're willing." I did not even hesitate. "Absolutely. Where do I sign?" Tom pulled out the petition and I added my name to it. He left a few minutes later, promising to keep me updated on the progress. Over the next week, the petition gained momentum. People who had been silent for years suddenly felt empowered to speak up. Stories circulated about Karen's petty enforcement actions, her rude behavior at board meetings, and her general attitude of superiority. Within 10 days, Tom had collected 23 signatures, well over the required threshold. The petition was formally submitted to the HOA board. According to the bylaws, they had to hold a recall election within 30 days. Karen was furious. She sent an email to the entire neighborhood calling the recall effort a conspiracy by disgruntled homeowners who refused to follow the rules. She claimed she was only trying to maintain property values and community standards. She positioned herself as a victim of a witch hunt. It didn't work. If anything, her email just reminded people of why they had signed the petition in the first place. The recall election was scheduled for a Saturday afternoon at the community clubhouse. Every homeowner in good standing was eligible to vote. The day of the election, the clubhouse was packed. I had never seen so many neighbors in one place. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Karen stood at the front of the room with a prepared statement. She talked about her dedication to the community, her countless volunteer hours, and her vision for maintaining high standards. She insisted that the recall was the result of a few troublemakers who wanted to turn the neighborhood into a free-for-all with no rules. When she finished, Richard opened the floor for others to speak. Tom stood up first. He calmly detailed his experiences with Karen's excessive enforcement actions and showed examples of the numerous petty violations she had cited him for. Other homeowners followed with their own stories. A pattern emerged of selective enforcement, personal vendettas, and abuse of power. When it was my turn, I stood up and told my story. I explained about the truck being towed without proper notice, about the board meeting where it was determined that Karen had violated procedure, and about her subsequent threats to sue me for reporting legitimate violations with her vehicle. "This isn't about whether we have rules or not," I said to the room. "Every community needs rules. This is about whether those rules are applied fairly and consistently, or whether they're weaponized to target specific people. Karen has proven repeatedly that she uses her position to bully homeowners. That's not leadership. That's abuse of power." The room erupted in applause. Karen's face went bright red. After everyone who wanted to speak had done so, the actual vote took place. Ballots were distributed, filled out, and collected. Richard and Susan counted the votes while the rest of us waited anxiously. Finally, Richard stood up. "The results are in." Out of 108 votes cast, 89 voted in favor of recall, 17 voted against, and 2 ballots were invalid. The motion to recall Karen Patterson as HOA president passes. The room burst into applause and cheers. I glanced at Karen. She looked like she had been slapped. Her face was pale except for 2 bright spots of color on her cheeks. "This is a mistake," she said loudly over the noise. "You're all making a huge mistake. This neighborhood is going to fall apart without proper leadership." "We'll manage," Richard said calmly. "According to our bylaws, as vice president, I'll assume the role of acting president until we can hold an election for a permanent replacement. Thank you for your service, Karen. You're still welcome to remain on the board as a regular member if you choose." "I wouldn't want to be part of this circus," Karen spat. She grabbed her purse and stormed out of the clubhouse. After she left, the mood shifted from tense to celebratory. People were shaking hands, hugging, thanking Tom and me and others who had spoken up. It felt like a weight had been lifted from the entire community. Richard pulled me aside as the crowd began to disperse. "Thank you for standing up to her. I don't think this would have happened without you pushing back. I just got tired of being pushed around. But I'm glad it turned into something bigger. Be prepared, though. Karen's not going to just fade away quietly. She's vindictive. Let her try something. I've got plenty of documentation of everything that's happened." I went home that evening feeling better than I had in months. The neighborhood bully had been defeated. Justice had prevailed, but Richard was right. Karen was not done yet. The following Monday, I received another certified letter. This time it was not from a lawyer. It was from the City of Scottsdale Code Enforcement Division. Apparently, someone had filed multiple complaints about my property. The letter listed various alleged violations. My front yard had weeds in the gravel. My garage door had chipped paint. My fence was the wrong color, and my air conditioning unit was visible from the street. I went outside and inspected my property carefully. The weeds were maybe 3 small plants in the rocks near my mailbox. The garage door had a tiny chip of paint about the size of a dime near the bottom corner. My fence was tan, which was one of the approved colors in the HOA covenants. And yes, my AC unit was visible if you really looked for it, but so was everyone else's in the neighborhood. This was Karen's retaliation. She was using the city to continue her harassment campaign now that she had lost her HOA power. I took photos of everything, documenting the minor and mostly made-up nature of the complaints. Then I called the code enforcement office. The officer assigned to my case was sympathetic when I explained the situation. "We get this sometimes," he said. Someone gets angry at a neighbor and files a bunch of complaints, hoping something sticks. Most of what's listed in your case is either not a violation at all, or so minor that we wouldn't normally take action on it. So, what happens now? I'll come by and do an inspection. If I determine the complaints are unfounded or excessively petty, I'll close the case. And if I find evidence of harassment, we can take action against the complainant for abusing the system. The person who filed the complaints is the former HOA president. She was just recalled last weekend for abusing her power. This is her way of getting back at me. I'll make note of that. Give me your address and I'll try to come by tomorrow. The inspector showed up the next afternoon. He walked around my property, took some notes, and then came to talk to me. "Mr. Jacobson, I'm closing this case. There's nothing here that constitutes a code violation. The weeds you've got are barely noticeable and don't meet the threshold for enforcement action. The paint chip is cosmetic and not a structural issue. Your fence color is fine. And the AC unit visibility is completely standard for this type of home. Whoever filed these complaints was clearly just trying to cause you trouble. Is there anything I can do about that? This is part of an ongoing harassment campaign. You can file a counter-complaint for harassment, but honestly, the best thing you can do is just document everything. If the same person keeps filing false reports, we'll eventually take action against them. But one instance, even if it's obviously petty, usually isn't enough." I thanked him for his time and he left. That evening, I sent an email to Richard, Tom, and David, updating them on Karen's latest tactic. David responded immediately. "This is getting out of hand. You might want to consider getting a restraining order." I had not thought about that. Could you get a restraining order against someone for HOA-related harassment? I did some research and found that in Arizona, you could petition for an order of protection or an injunction against harassment if someone was engaging in a pattern of behavior designed to harass, annoy, or alarm you. Multiple false code enforcement complaints, combined with the previous towing incident and threat of a lawsuit, might be enough to qualify. I spent the evening gathering all my documentation. The timeline of Karen's complaints against me. The truck towing incident and subsequent board meeting minutes. Her demand letter threatening a lawsuit. The code enforcement complaint and the inspector's determination that it was unfounded. Screenshots of her hostile emails to the neighborhood. The next day, I went to the courthouse and filed for an injunction against harassment. The process was simpler than I had expected. I filled out forms describing the pattern of harassment, attached my evidence, and paid a filing fee. A hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks out. Karen would be served with the petition and would have the opportunity to respond. Part of me felt like maybe I was going too far, but another part of me knew that Karen was not going to stop unless someone made her stop. This was not just about me anymore. It was about setting a precedent that this kind of behavior had consequences. The sheriff's deputy served Karen with the petition 3 days later. I know because she immediately sent me a text message, which was probably not smart on her part given that I was trying to prove she was harassing me. The text said, "You are going to regret this. I will make your life a living hell. You have no idea what you've started." I screenshot the text immediately and added it to my evidence file. Then I blocked her number. The hearing arrived quickly. I showed up at the courthouse dressed in a button-down shirt and slacks, carrying a folder with all my documentation. Karen was there with her husband, a quiet man named Gerald, who I had only seen a handful of times. She was dressed professionally and looked composed, though her eyes were cold when she saw me. We were called into the judge's chambers. The judge, a middle-aged woman named Judge Rodriguez, reviewed the petition and asked me to explain the situation. I walked her through everything chronologically. The months of petty HOA complaints, the truck towing without proper notice, the response letter threatening a lawsuit, the recall election, and the retaliatory code enforcement complaint. I showed her the evidence for each incident, including the threatening text message Karen had sent after being served with the petition. Judge Rodriguez turned to Karen. "Mrs. Patterson, do you want to respond to these allegations?" Karen launched into a lengthy explanation about how I was a difficult homeowner who refused to follow community rules, how I had deliberately gotten her car towed out of spite, and how I was now trying to weaponize the court system to avoid accountability. "Your Honor, I sent that text message out of frustration because Mr. Jacobson has been making my life miserable for months. He turned the entire neighborhood against me, got me recalled as HOA president, and is now trying to portray himself as the victim when he's actually the aggressor." Judge Rodriguez looked unimpressed. "Mrs. Patterson, you dispute the factual claims that Mr. Jacobson has made. Did you or did you not have his truck towed without following proper HOA procedure?" "I had his truck towed because it was a commercial vehicle in violation of our covenants." "And the HOA board determined that was incorrect. Is that right?" "Some members of the board sided with him, yes." "Did you send him a notice before taking that action?" Karen hesitated. "No, but the violation was obvious. So you admit you didn't follow your own procedures." "Did you or did you not send him a letter threatening to sue him?" "My attorney sent a demand letter, yes. That's standard practice." "For what grounds?" "For harassment." "Because he reported that your vehicle had expired registration and was parked illegally." "He only did that to get back at me." "But were those reports factually accurate? Was your registration actually expired, and was your car actually parked in violation of local ordinances?" Karen's jaw tightened. "The registration had expired, yes, but I wasn't aware of it. And the parking was just overnight, which is a ridiculous rule anyway. But you were in violation of the rules you yourself were enforcing against others. That's different. I wasn't doing it intentionally." "Mrs. Patterson, intent isn't really relevant to whether or not someone violated a parking rule, is it? Either you parked there or you didn't. Either your registration was expired or it wasn't." Karen did not have a good answer to that. Judge Rodriguez looked at the evidence again, particularly the threatening text message. "Mrs. Patterson, telling someone you're going to make their life a living hell after they file for protection against harassment is not a good look. It actually tends to prove their point." I was upset. "He's ruining my reputation in the neighborhood." "Did he make false statements about you, Or did he simply oppose your actions as HOA president? He turned people against me. That's not an answer to my question. Did he make false statements? Karen was silent. Judge Rodriguez made some notes. I'm going to grant the injunction against harassment. Mrs. Patterson, you are prohibited from contacting Mr. Jacobson directly or indirectly, from filing complaints against him with the HOA or any government agency, unless those complaints are based on clear, unambiguous violations, and from making any threatening or harassing statements about him to third parties. This order is effective immediately and will remain in place for 1 year. If you violate this order, you can be held in contempt of court and face criminal charges. Do you understand? Karen's face was bright red. This is ridiculous. He's the one who should be. Do you understand the terms of this order, Mrs. Patterson? Yes, Karen said tightly. Mr. Jacobson, do you have any questions? No, Your Honor, thank you. Court is adjourned. The clerk will provide you both with copies of the order. We filed out of the chambers. Karen avoided looking at me. I felt a profound sense of relief. It was finally over. Karen legally could not harass me anymore without facing serious consequences. As I walked to my truck, Tom called me. Hey, how did the hearing go? I got the injunction. She's legally prohibited from contacting me or filing false complaints. That's great news. Listen, there's something else you should know. At the board meeting last night, we voted to hire a property management company to handle HOA business going forward. Too much drama with volunteer management. And we're also reviewing all the violation notices Karen issued over the past 3 years to see if any others were improper. That's a good idea. How many do you think were problematic? Based on what people are reporting, probably dozens. We might end up issuing refunds for improper fines and towing fees. The HOA could be looking at significant liability. Could homeowners sue the HOA? Potentially. David is reviewing the legal risks. But the good news is that by taking corrective action now, we're showing good faith, which should limit any damages. What about Karen personally? Could she be held liable? David thinks so, especially if we can show she was acting outside the scope of her authority or in bad faith. But that would be up to individual homeowners to pursue. I thought about that. Part of me wanted to sue Karen for all the grief she had caused me, but another part of me just wanted to move on. I had won. She had been recalled, I had gotten an injunction, and she could not bother me anymore. Maybe that was enough. Over the next few weeks, life gradually returned to normal. The new property management company took over HOA operations and brought a much more professional, reasonable approach to enforcement. The neighborhood felt different, lighter somehow, without Karen's oppressive presence hanging over everything. I heard through the grapevine that Karen and her husband were considering selling their house and moving. Apparently, she could not handle the shame of being recalled and having a harassment injunction against her. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. Then, about a month after the hearing, I got a call from David Park. Ethan, you might want to sit down for this. What's going on? We've been reviewing the HOA finances as part of bringing on the management company. There are some irregularities. What kind of irregularities? Money that's unaccounted for, checks written to cash, expense reports that don't match receipts. We're talking about potentially thousands of dollars over the past 2 years. My stomach dropped. You think Karen was stealing from the HOA? I think we need to do a formal audit. But yes, it looks suspicious. I wanted to give you a heads up because you've been so involved in all of this. What happens if the audit confirms embezzlement? We'd have to report it to the police. It would be a criminal matter at that point. Do you need anything from me? Not right now. Just wanted to keep you informed. I'll let you know what the audit reveals. We hung up and I sat there processing this information. If Karen had actually been stealing from the HOA, that changed everything. This was not just petty tyranny anymore. It was actual crime. The audit took 3 weeks. When the results came back, they were damning. Over a period of 28 months, Karen had embezzled just over $32,000 from the HOA. She had done it through a combination of fake expense reports, checks written to cash that she claimed were for various contractors who were never actually hired, and straight-up forging signatures on withdrawal slips from the HOA bank account. The board had no choice. They filed a police report. 2 weeks later, Karen Patterson was arrested and charged with theft, fraud, and forgery. The amounts involved meant these were felony charges. She was looking at potentially years in prison if convicted. The neighborhood was shocked. Even people who had disliked Karen had not thought she was an actual criminal, but the evidence was apparently overwhelming. Her husband Gerald hired an expensive lawyer, but the case seemed pretty open and shut. The bank records, the fake receipts, the forged signatures, it was all there in black and white. 3 months later, Karen took a plea deal. She pleaded guilty to 1 count of felony theft and 1 count of fraud. In exchange for the plea, she was sentenced to 2 years in prison with the possibility of parole after serving 60% of the sentence, 5 years of probation after release, and she was ordered to pay full restitution to the HOA. I attended the sentencing hearing. I felt like I needed to see it through to the end. Karen looked small and defeated standing before the judge. She read a prepared statement apologizing for her actions and blaming stress and financial pressure. The judge was not sympathetic. "Mrs. Patterson, you held a position of trust in your community, and you violated that trust in the worst possible way. You stole from your neighbors to fund your lifestyle, and based on the evidence presented, you showed no remorse until you were caught. The sentence is appropriate, and I hope you use your time in prison to reflect on your actions." As Karen was led away in handcuffs, I felt a complicated mix of emotions. Satisfaction that justice had been served, pity for Gerald, who seemed like a decent guy caught in his wife's mess, and relief that this chapter of my life was finally, definitively closed. I walked out of the courthouse into the bright Arizona sunshine. Tom was waiting for me outside. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Honestly, I'm just glad it's over. I never wanted any of this. I just wanted to live in my house in peace." "Well, you definitely accomplished that, and you helped uncover a criminal in the process. The whole neighborhood owes you." "I don't know about that. I just stood up for myself. Sometimes that's all it takes. One person willing to say no, willing to push back. You inspired a lot of people, Ethan." We walked to our vehicles together. As I drove home, I thought about everything that had happened. It had started with such a small thing, my truck being towed, and it had snowballed into recall elections and criminal charges. But maybe Tom was right. Maybe it just took one person refusing to be bullied, one person documenting everything and fighting back through proper channels, one person willing to say that rules should be applied fairly or not at all. When I got home, I pulled into my driveway, my Ford F-150 sitting exactly where it belonged. I grabbed a beer from the fridge and sat on my back patio, looking out at the desert landscape behind my house. My phone buzzed with a text from Richard. "Board meeting next week to discuss electing a permanent president. Several people have suggested nominating you. Would you be interested?" I laughed and typed back, "Absolutely not. I've had enough HOA drama for one lifetime, but thank you." "Fair enough," he replied. "Can't say I blame you." I set my phone down and took a long drink of my beer. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Somewhere in the neighborhood, I could hear kids playing, someone mowing their lawn, the normal sounds of suburban life. No violation notices. No tow trucks. No Karen Patterson making everyone miserable. Just peace. And after everything that had happened, peace was exactly what I needed. The following months proved that Karen's influence had been more pervasive than anyone had realized. As the new property management company reviewed old files, they found evidence of selective enforcement against at least 15 different homeowners. Some people had been fined hundreds of dollars for violations that other residents committed without consequence. The HOA ended up issuing refunds totaling over $8,000 to homeowners who had been unfairly targeted. The neighborhood started to feel like an actual community again, instead of a police state. People put up holiday decorations without fear. Kids drew chalk art on sidewalks. Someone started a neighborhood Facebook group that focused on community events and helping each other out, rather than reporting violations. I became friends with several neighbors I had barely known before, bonded by our shared experience of surviving Karen's reign of terror. Tom and I started having regular barbecues. Susan from the HOA board turned out to make incredible cookies and started bringing them to everyone. Even quiet Gerald, after Karen went to prison, seemed to relax and become more social. He ended up selling the house and moving closer to his daughter in California, but before he left, he personally apologized to me and several other neighbors for not stopping Karen's behavior sooner. I knew she was going too far, he admitted over coffee one afternoon. But she was so convinced she was doing the right thing, maintaining standards. I just thought she was being overzealous. I never imagined she was stealing. You couldn't have known, I assured him. She hid it well. Still, I should have paid more attention. I'm sorry for what you went through. As for me, I finally felt like I could just live my life. I worked on my construction projects, came home to my house, maintained my property to reasonable standards, and never worried about finding a violation notice on my door. The new HOA board, with Richard as the elected president and a more balanced group of members, operated with transparency and fairness. They held quarterly meetings where homeowners could voice concerns. They updated the covenants to remove some of the more ridiculous rules. And they made sure that any enforcement actions were preceded by proper notice and opportunities for homeowners to respond. My truck sat in my driveway every night without issue. Nobody complained about it. Nobody measured my grass with a ruler. Nobody reported me for putting my trash cans out a few hours early. It was amazing how much better life was when people just treated each other like reasonable adults, instead of looking for reasons to exercise petty power over one another. One evening, about 6 months after Karen's sentencing, I was working in my garage when a car pulled up. A woman I did not recognize got out and walked over. "Are you Ethan Jacobson?" she asked. "Yes, can I help you? My name is Michelle. I live over in the Desert View HOA, about 2 miles from here. I heard about what happened with your HOA president and how you fought back. We're dealing with a similar situation in our neighborhood, and I was hoping you might have some advice." I wiped my hands on a rag and gestured for her to continue. She told me a story that sounded depressingly familiar. An overzealous HOA board member who filed constant violations, who towed cars for minor infractions, who made life miserable for anyone who questioned their authority. "The thing is," Michelle said, "most people in our neighborhood are either scared to fight back or they just don't know how. When I heard your story, I thought maybe you could tell me what worked for you." I invited her to sit down and spent the next hour walking her through everything. Document everything. Know your rights. Read the governing documents carefully. Look for procedural violations. Don't be afraid to escalate to the board or even the courts if necessary. build coalition with other affected homeowners. And most importantly, stay calm and stick to facts rather than emotions. The key is that you can't stoop to their level, I explained. You have to be better than they are. Follow the rules even when they don't. Keep everything documented and be persistent. People like that count on others giving up because it's easier. Don't give them that satisfaction. Michelle took notes on her phone and thanked me profusely when she left. I felt good about helping her, like maybe something positive could come out of my experience. Over the next year, I heard from 3 more homeowners in different neighborhoods dealing with similar situations. Word had apparently spread about the Patterson situation, and I had somehow become an informal consultant for people dealing with HOA tyranny. I helped where I could, always emphasizing legal and proper channels, always encouraging documentation and coalition building. I heard back from several of them that they had successfully addressed their situations, either through board elections, management changes, or in one case, another criminal investigation that revealed embezzlement. It seemed that Patterson had not been unique. There were apparently a lot of people who got a little bit of power in an HOA and let it go to their heads. And unfortunately, there were also people who used that power to cover up criminal activity. But the more people who stood up and fought back properly, the harder it became for those petty tyrants to operate. 2 years after the truck towing incident that started everything, I was sitting on my patio again, this time with a group of neighbors for a weekend barbecue. Tom was manning the grill, Susan had brought her famous cookies for dessert, and several other neighbors I had become friends with were there with their families. Someone brought up the Patterson saga, as people occasionally did, usually with a mix of disbelief and dark humor. "I still can't believe she had the nerve to have your truck towed from your own driveway," Tom said, shaking his head. "Best thing she ever did for this neighborhood," I replied, raising my beer. "If she hadn't done that, I never would have pushed back. She never would have been recalled. The embezzlement never would have been discovered. We would still be living under her thumb. So, in a weird way, we should thank her," Susan said with a laugh. "I wouldn't go that far, but I will say that it taught me something important. You can't just go along with unreasonable authority figures because it's easier. Sometimes you have to stand up for yourself, even when it's uncomfortable or scary. Because if you don't, who will?" Everyone raised their drinks to that. As the evening wore on and the conversation drifted to other topics, I looked around at my neighbors, at the community we had built in the aftermath of Karen's downfall. This was what a neighborhood should be. People looking out for each other, supporting each other, treating each other with respect and kindness. Not perfect, of course. We still had disagreements sometimes. People still occasionally left their trash cans out too long or let their yards get a bit overgrown. But we handled it like adults, with friendly reminders and offers to help rather than violation notices and towing threats. My phone buzzed with a text from David Park, the lawyer from the old HOA board. He had moved away a few months earlier, but we still kept in touch. "Saw in the news that Patterson was denied early parole. She'll serve the full 2 years. Thought you'd want to know." I typed back a quick thanks and put my phone away. I felt nothing about the news. No satisfaction, no pity, nothing. Patterson had become irrelevant to my life, which was exactly how it should be. That night, after everyone had gone home and I was cleaning up, I looked at my Ford F-150 parked in the driveway where it belonged. It was just a truck. A tool I used for work, a vehicle that got me from place to place. But it had become a symbol of something bigger. Standing up for yourself. Not letting others push you around. Fighting back against injustice, even petty injustice, because if you don't, it just gets worse. I had paid my dues in the great HOA war of Scottsdale. I had my truck towed, had someone's car towed in return, documented everything, fought through board meetings and court hearings, and ultimately helped uncover a criminal enterprise operating under the guise of community standards. And in the end, justice had been served. Karen paid my towing fees, paid restitution to the HOA, and paid with her freedom for her crimes. The neighborhood was better off. I was better off. And hopefully, my experience had helped a few other people in other neighborhoods stand up to their own petty tyrants. As I locked up the house and headed to bed, I smiled thinking about that morning 2 years ago when I had run outside in my gym shorts to find a tow truck taking my vehicle. If someone had told me then where it would all lead, I never would have believed them. But I would do it all again in a heartbeat, because some things are worth fighting for, and the right to live peacefully in your own home without harassment is definitely one of them. The story of HOA Karen who towed my truck from my own driveway had become neighborhood legend. Parents told it to their kids as a cautionary tale about standing up to bullies. New homeowners heard about it and felt reassured that this was a community that did not tolerate abuse of power. And I got to live the rest of my days in peace, with my truck parked exactly where it belonged, in my own driveway, where no one would ever tow it again.